Fantastic. Great to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. So we're going to talk about optimizing your hormones for superhuman results. Now, this is obviously a massive subject. So we're really only going to scrape the surface of us in the next 45 minutes. What we're going to look at is a tiny bit about me. Then we look at the endocrine system, which is our hormone system. We actually have over 50 hormones every week. So we're going to look at some of the key ones that you might have heard of and look at how they can impact your performance, both physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally. We'll run through some of those. A quick word on the menopause and andropause. Then we're going to look at actually some of the lifestyle adjustments you can do. So as we go through each of these hormones, I'm going to give you, after we've covered them, some tips. And you'll find a lot of them are going to be quite similar, right? We're going to be hammering a consistent message here. But we're going to finish with these performance points, give you some takeaways, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So a bit about me, because you might not know me. I originally trained as a psychologist way back. I have an MSc in applied psychology. I went into corporate world, but I left that in 2011 to pursue my passion for helping transform people's lives. So I've got well over a decade of experience now across psychology, NLP, stress management, coaching, personal training, nutrition. I'm a hormone specialist. I look at gut health. I work in the menopause a lot. And won multiple awards for my work. We do have a great podcast, The Midlife Mentors, because I work with my wife and we specialize especially in midlife health and happiness. So do check that out. It's called The Midlife Mentors, top 1.5% globally. I'm also an author, speaker, and regular press commentator. And that is all I'm going to say about it. So let's get on to the subject at hand, which is hormones. So what are hormones? Quite simply, hormones are chemical messengers that go directly into our bloodstream and flow around the body and affect us on a number of levels. They have a physical function, they have a psychological function, they have a mood function. And also important to note, they interact with something called neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are also chemical messengers, but they're more concerned with things like mood and cognition. As I said, there's over 50 hormones that act upon the body. They're responsible for things like our development and growth, our metabolism, our sexual function, reproductive health, our cognitive function and mood, maintenance of our body temperature. And you can see here on the diagram the various organs around the body where different hormones are produced. Essentially, we can think of the hypothalamus in the brain as like the nerve center for all hormone production, but we produce them, in our adrenal glands, our liver, our pancreas, our kidneys. We've got them going on everywhere. So all of the organs in our body will have hormone receptors, which is why hormones can have such an impact on our life and why it's important to understand what could be going on for us so we can start to work with them and optimize our health. So the first hormone I'm going to talk about is one you probably had heard of, called insulin. So quite simply put, when we eat or drink something, insulin is a hormone that transforms that food or drink into energy. Essentially, it'll break it down into glucose, which is energy that's available right now. Anything we don't use is then stored as glycogen in the muscles for use later. And anything we don't utilize after that gets stored as body fat. Now, here is where most people are going wrong in the modern world. We're getting on what we call the insulin roller coaster. So you can see here, in reality, we would never have a straight blue line for insulin, of course not. But we want to try and get our insulin sensitivity up. So have this nice, smooth green line, not this big red roller coaster line. Here's the thing. As we age, we become more insulin resistant, which means that we're less effective at transforming the food we eat into the energy to utilize. We're more likely to store it as fat, basically. But also, insulin has an effect on mood as well. So when we've got high swinging insulin levels, when we're insulin resistant, it's linked with things like anxiety and depression. So how do we avoid getting on this insulin roller coaster? Well, it's simple. When we wake up, normally we'll break our fast, have our breakfast, and that's going to produce the first shot of insulin for the day, if you like, to break down that food and give us our energy. Now, a lot of us will start the day with something really sugary, right? We might chuck some cereals in a bowl. We might have a coffee with some syrup in it, some sugars, or grab a sweet muffin. As soon as we eat that, this is really important. The first thing we eat in the day after we have fasted overnight is going to set our insulin bandwidth for the day. So if we eat something that's high sugar, what we call a high GI food, that releases energy very fast, we're going to spike the insulin very high. Now, when we spike it, that's followed by a crash. And I always say to people, you can liken that to, you get up in the morning and you do have that sweet breakfast and you're all like hyping to go. But then by mid-morning, you've got that slump and you feel like you've got no energy. So it's like, oh, right, I need another coffee. I'm going to have some biscuits. The insulin spikes again comes down. So the first thing we want to do is start having a breakfast that is lower GI. So we can have things like overnight oats. We can make ourselves a smoothie with oats with some berries. We want to put protein in there as well. When we combine our food, so if we have like something that's a high GI food, a banana is a great example. And incidentally, I'm going to talk about this because the problem in the Western world is like our palates have got sweeter and sweeter, and there is more and more sugar in all our food. Even bananas, the bananas of now are 30 to 50% higher sugar content than the bananas of 30 years ago. They've been bred selectively to have more sugar in them. If we were to eat that banana, it's going to spike our insulin. However, we get that banana and we put some peanut butter on it, because we've added fats to it, that's going to slow the release of insulin into the body. So that's the first thing we want to think about, having a great breakfast to start the day. And then focus our meals around having like a lot of protein, some good sensible carbohydrates, which means like not refined carbs, keeping those sugars low, and of course a little bit of healthy fats as well. So what we're aiming to do is improve our what we call our metabolic flexibility. Our bodies can basically switch between burning carbohydrates for energy or burning fat for energy. So when we wake up in the morning, because we have fasted overnight, we should already be burning body fat for energy. When we have that first meal, we're going to switch to carbohydrate energy, which will need to get us through the day. But the trouble is, as we get more insulin resistant, as we eat more foods with sugars, we lose that metabolic flexibility and we become more insulin resistant. So this is my first takeaway for you. Start to look at food labeling, because there's a big clue in it, right? We want to cut out as much processed food as possible. And we have today processed food and also ultra processed food, really, really bad. But you want to cut out as much sugar, especially. You want to look at the food label. So food has a label on it. It will say carbohydrates. And then under that, it will say of which sugars. So anything that is 21.5% above is considered a high sugar product. Anything 5% or lower is considered low sugar. So obviously you want to aim to get towards the lower end of that scale. And you would be really surprised. You might pick up like, a tuna sandwich from the shop and think, well, that's going to be low sugar. But actually food manufacturers know that sugar's highly addictive, highly tasty. We want to eat more of it. So it's in absolutely everything. So start looking at those labels. Avoid those sugary drinks. And there's a lot of research there, even if you're drinking like, your diet sodas, there's still some evidence that the sweeteners will still spike our insulin in the same way, because the body just tastes the sweet thing and thinks it is sugar. We want to aim for those low GI foods. Avoiding high sugar and processed foods will help that. And when you are having those higher GI foods, combine them with fats or protein to slow the energy release. Now remember that how you're starting your day is going to affect your insulin levels the rest of the day, and indeed your energy levels for the day. So make sure you get off to a great start. Drink lots of water to stay hydrated. It's a fact that often we'll mistake dehydration for fatigue or hunger. So we'll think we're tired and or we'll go for a snack when actually we just need to get more fluids in. And when you are needing a snack, rather than going for that high sugar thing, go for something protein and healthy fats based. So you'll bring down that insulin response and you'll bring up the levels of your hunger hormone, leptin, so you'll feel fuller for longer. So that's insulin. That's my first one. The next one we're going to talk about is the thyroid. And this is a big one that gets a lot of press. A lot of people think that they have an underactive thyroid, so that's why they put on weight. Often that's not the case. Of course, there are people out there that do have underactive thyroids, but basically our thyroid is a gland we have, again, controlled by the hypothalamus. It produces a number of hormones, T3, T4, calcitonin, TSH, and TRH. The two main ones you've heard of is T4 and T3, thyroxine and triiodithyroid. They're what's referred to as your thyroid hormone. T4 is inactive where T3 is active, and T4 goes into the body and then transforms into T3. But a thyroid condition you may have heard of is hypothyroidism, which means it's underactive. This is where you might get things like weight gain. You've got hyperthyroidism, where it's overactive, where you might actually struggle to put weight on. Then you have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition where the body's immune response will actually keep attacking the thyroid gland. So if you have got something wrong with your thyroid, you'll normally get noticeable symptoms. The key ones are usually around metabolism and digestion, because if we've got too much going in, we can get faster than normal, too little will slow down. So if you've got things like unexplained weight gain or weight loss, you find your heart rate's like normally slow or abnormally fast, you find you're getting intolerant to cold or heat, your skin's getting dry or overly greasy. On the other hand, this is flip sides of the coin here. You've got irregular menstrual cycles, you're feeling fatigued, you've got anxiety, irritability, then it could be you should go and see your doctor, because there are lifestyle adjustments I'm going to tell you in a moment, but of course you can go and get medical treatment for underactive or overactive thyroid as well. If you want to make adjustments, and again, this is what we're going to keep coming back to, you want to stick to a diet that's low in sugar and processed foods. Again, sugar is inflammatory to the body and brain. It actually speeds up brain aging and it disrupts our endocrine system. Remember one of those first slides, the endocrine system is all of our hormone pathways. Sugar actually disrupts it. We want to make sure we're getting enough vegetables that limit our intake of cruciferous, because there's some research suggests that can affect your thyroid. Find ways to reduce your stress, and this is one we're going to come back to, and we're going to look at stress in detail, actually. We want to exercise regularly. We want to maintain a healthy body weight. Again, a lot of research, if we're carrying too much body fat, that can have an effect on our thyroid in itself. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We get this negative loop going on. And if you are having any of the symptoms, then do seek medical advice. So we've covered insulin and thyroid. The next one we're going to talk to is exciting ones. So I specialize mainly in midlife health. So I talk a lot about menopause and andropause, which is low testosterone for men as they age. And I actually go into organizations and present on this and run workshops and talk to people about this, both men and women. Essentially, obviously men and women have very different primary sex hormones. For women, the primary sex hormones are estrogen and progesterone. And we can see for women, those hormones will peak around the late 20s, early 30s, peak reproductive time, and then trail away. And of course, when that decline in progesterone and estrogen comes, that's when women go into the menopause, which then marks the end of the reproductive cycle. For men, our primary sex hormone is testosterone, which peaks in our early 20s and then declines at a steady rate of 1 to 2% per year, which doesn't sound a lot. When you're compounding it, by the time you're hitting your 50s or 60s, your T levels could be 30 to 50% lower than they were in their 20s. Then you might start noticing some symptoms as well. And we're going to cover those very briefly on menopause and andropause. Huge, huge topic, but we can't cover everything in this. So let's talk about the female sex hormones, of course. And it's worth pointing out at the start that females, of course, do have testosterone as well, just at much lower levels than men. We're going to talk about mental health in the menstrual cycle. So as women go through their menstrual cycle, different hormones are firing in different ways. And these have a number of physical and psychological effects and affect mood. So if we have days 1 to 7, which would typically be the period, some things you might experience there would be anxiety, irritability, sadness, feeling vulnerable. We go into what we call then the follicular phase. The energy comes back. We can have high self-esteem. We're feeling sociable. We have ovulation at day 14 when libido increases, obviously priming for reproduction there was the original evolutionary reason for that. And then we have what we call the luteal phase, which takes us out to day 28, when we might feel calmer, but also more vulnerable and we're more prone to fatigue. The reason I'm highlighting this is when we understand and when we're tracking our cycle, then we can make adjustments. We can know what's coming and make adjustments around our mood. Think, okay, I know my period's coming. I'm likely to be more anxious, irritable, sad. So what am I going to do around that? So it's important that we understand this so we can understand what's going on internally, like not feel mad that our behavior is out of our control, but understand what's going on so we can work with it. Of course, when we're talking about being superhuman, this also has an impact on our training as well, which I love this. So when you're in your menstrual phase, ladies, your estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest, meaning your testosterone is more dominant. So you've got like more tolerance, you've got less fatigue, more energy, you actually sweat more efficiently. And this is a great time to push for gains, especially with things like resistance training and building muscle, because your testosterone is dominant. And also in this phase, due to the hormone changes, you're more primed to use glycogen as an energy source, so you'll have more energy. Now, as you go into the follicular phase from day 7 to 14, your estrogen begins to slowly increase. You've still got great advantages to train here. And the first half of your cycle, so like days 1 to 14, is best for muscular gains. That's what training has shown. That's what research has shown us. But and really important to note, during the second half of this follicular phase, and then it's kind of like lapping into the beginning of the luteal phase, you increased risk of injury, massive increase of risk, particularly ACL. It's because as estrogen comes up in the body, tendons and ligaments actually loosen up, become more elastic, and then that leads to potential injury risk. We have ovulation. Then we go into the luteal phase, which is the end, 15 to 28. You're likely to feel more fatigue here. Your core temperature actually raises, and you can't access glycogen as efficiently for energy. You do burn more calories as metabolic rate is raised. So if we're looking at performance here, ladies, if you want to think, right, during the first half of my menstrual cycle, I'm going to train for muscular gains, a lot of energy work, power work. In the second half, I might switch to my cardio, be my dominant training route, because I'm going to burn more calories and I know I'm going to feel more fatigued. So the heavy weights probably isn't in, but the cardio training is. So that was estrogen and progesterone. Now, testosterone, and this is relevant for men as well, but just showing, this is the chart showing how testosterone peaks for men in their 20s and then declines away until it can become an issue for men kind of 50 plus that they go into something called andropause, where low testosterone will start to affect them psychologically, emotionally, physically as well. Testosterone, of course, plays a role in many other areas of our body apart from the obvious one we think of, which is kind of like energy, drive, libido, muscles. As testosterone declines, it means our muscles will start to break down, we'll lose strength, and we'll lose muscle mass. Now, our muscles, what we call metabolically active, meaning that they burn calories even at rest. So, of course, one thing that can happen if our testosterone levels are dropping, but our food intake is the same, we're carrying less muscle, we start to store more of that energy as fat because we're just not burning as many calories. On the functional side, we just don't want to be getting weaker as we get older. I don't know what age people are watching this, but the statistics for people who fall and break something at 65 plus and their increased mortality risk are shocking. And the way we can defend against that is being strong enough and working on our strength and our balance so that we don't fall in the first place, or if we do, we don't hurt ourselves and get up. As we've got, testosterone also plays a role in metabolism. So as that lowers, we're more likely to lay on fat around our middle. Low testosterone is also indicated with low mood, anxiety, brain fog, and depression. And this is why it affects men and women as well. For men, it is our main sex hormone, but for women, you will notice effects of testosterone as well, which is why in the conversations going on around HRT at the moment, there's a lot of discussion about adding testosterone in as well for women for all the benefits it can give. This is what's going on, but what can we do about it? Well, here's some tips. We can train in the mornings when our testosterone levels are the highest. When we wake up, our testosterone levels and our human growth hormone levels are going to be the highest. So that's the best time to train if we can. Research shows when we resistance train regularly, we'll actually boost our testosterone and human growth hormone levels, which means if we're doing it consistently, we're going to slow that rate of decline. So we're going to keep our levels more elevated. We want to make sure that we're getting adequate recovery and sleep, because one thing that will decline our testosterone is sleep. And the second point there, stress as well. Stress also impacts. And we're going to look at that again. I've said that. But when we get to cortisol, we're going to look at the impact that has on our primary sex hormones. For men, we want to avoid what we call phytoestrogens. So these can be in our food chain. The main culprits are actually things like soy that can mimic estrogen in the body. For women, there's mixed research around this. Some women actually find it helpful to have more phytoestrogens in their diet. Other women find it not so helpful. For men, we want to try and avoid it. So we don't want estrogen to be high and suppress testosterone further. But also things called chemicals that we get in plastic called BPAs can disrupt our endocrine system as well. Now, thankfully, we don't see those too much anymore, but it used to be like things like food containers, flasks, so we just want to be careful if we're putting stuff in plastic and chucking it in the microwave to heat food, that we're not getting the leaching of the chemicals into the food. We want to ensure that we're getting adequate levels of our zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, and vitamin D3. They all play a key role in hormone pathways. That's good advice for men and women because it supports estrogen as well as testosterone. Have more sex because that does stimulate testosterone production. And lastly, sadly, watch your alcohol intake. Alcohol will depress levels of testosterone. So I'm going to talk a little now about stress and cortisol. And this is something, again, that I go into organizations to talk about because I guess for a lot of people in the corporate world, stress is such a big constant player. And actually, sadly, for a long time, it's been worn as almost like a badge of honor, hasn't it? Oh, I'm so busy, I'm so stressed, that's great for me. But, there's no getting away from it. Stress is what we call the silent killer. We live in a really stressful world. We have the stress web here. I won't refer, but we have things like financial stresses, social, physical, mental, cultural, and emotional, all these things pushing on us. Now, our stress response is an amazing thing. It's an evolutionary tool that's allowed the human race to survive, but it is designed for us to counter a physical threat. You'll know it as the fight or flight response. Actually, the correct response is fight, flight, or flop. We just don't see flop that often, but you often see it in things like, bunny rabbits that will just freeze and go stiff. That can happen to human beings as well. Essentially, it was designed so that when we're out and about hunting, gathering, and some big beast runs out at us, we get this flush of chemicals through the body, flush of hormones, deciding whether we're going to stay and fight that beast or run away so we live to fight another day. The two main hormones that release are adrenaline and cortisol. We're going to focus on cortisol here because this is one that has become a big player in many people's lives. Now, obviously, if you're going to fight a big hairy beast, you want to be primed in a certain way. So what cortisol and adrenaline do is they shut down the blood flow to areas where it's not needed right now. So if you're going to fight a big hairy beast, obviously it's thinking, we don't need your digestive system going, we don't need your reproductive system going. So all those will start to shut down, which is why a lot of IBS related issues may be just due to stress and the way we tend to eat on the run now. Going out, grabbing sandwiches at your desk, eating standing up, being in a stressful situation anyway. Your immune system shuts down because you don't need it right now in that fight or flight. Your blood sugar spikes because you're releasing energy to the body. Your blood pressure shoots up, your heart starts pumping again because we're getting primed for action. Pain sensitivity decreases, which so this is increasing your injury risk. And all the blood essentially goes to the muscles ready for action. Interestingly, serotonin drops. And although we can have very narrow, heightened focus on what we perceived threat is, everything else can become a bit of a blur. So this is what cortisol does. So why are we so stressed? Well, we fill our life with to-dos. We've become used to being always on. Technology is enabling wonderful things like this summit to go ahead, but it means we're never off. If we think back to, our parents' generation, maybe, they were on when they got to the office in the morning and they were off when they left the office at the end of the day. Whereas now we're fielding emails, phone calls all the time. We have high expectations from society and ourselves. And we believe success is based on what we have rather than what we are. So we're always chasing the next thing to be happy. And social media plays a massive role in driving this. The stats on life dissatisfaction and increased anxiety can be tracked going up along with the rise in social media. We don't take the time to be still and create space. We don't set boundaries. We have a lack of human-to-human connection and communication. All these things increase our stress. Did you know, like, we know the physical and mental signs, the mental and psychological signs of stress, but stress can also make you put on weight. It actually makes us cortisol, makes us put on abdominal fat, particularly around the hips and thighs for women as well. Interferes with digestion, makes you more insulin resistant, breaks down the muscles. We're going to what we call a catabolic state. We're just trying to get energy to fight the threat. So it'll break down muscle tissue and depletes your sex drive. Here's why. This is a stress hormone pathway. So I won't break it all down, but you can see at the top of the legs there, you have a hormone called progesterone, which is known as the mother hormone. So progesterone makes our progesterone and our cortisol, our DHEA and our testosterone and estrogen. So if we're stressed all the time and making cortisol continually as we go through our day, then we're going to be using more and more of that progesterone for making cortisol, which means that there's less available for the DHEA. Now, DHEA is known as a youth hormone. And this is why, sometimes people that have had a massive stress in their life, you can see that they've visibly aged from that stress, low DHEA. But DHEA also makes our testosterone and estrogen. So if we're making more and more cortisol and our DHEA is low, guess what? We've got lower testosterone, lower estrogen. All those things we've already talked about with testosterone and estrogen, all the negative effects, they're multiplied. We can think of stress as a negative amplifier for every effect that we don't want when it comes to hormones, which is why learning to handle your stress is absolutely crucial. Now, in terms of that, I'd say plan your life, plan your days and weeks. Our subconscious loves to feel that there's some element of control. This is why stress went up during the pandemic. Suddenly people, the structure to their days was gone. They felt like they were out of control. Actually giving yourself a structure, creating it, gives that artificial, support to your subconscious that, yes, everything's under control. Cut back on alcohol and cigarettes. They actually increase stress, not decrease it. Again, we're going to say this, cut out processed food and sugar. Sugar weakens our body's ability to respond to stress, and it can make you more anxious as well. We want to do physical exercise regularly. When we do physical exercise, we produce endorphins, feel-good hormones. Remember, stress makes things like serotonin drop. Endorphins will actually increase that back up. Make sure we're getting enough sleep. We want to practice controlling our reaction to triggers. Easier said than done, but there are various tools out there. Again, this is something that I go and talk about with organizations, giving tools for people to deal with stress. But recognize that it's rarely the event itself that's stressful, it's our reaction to it, and we are capable of choosing our reaction. We want to start our day with positive intent. So before you get up and you look at your phone, and so let the outside world in, looking at messages, looking at social media, turning the telly on to see the news, just ground yourself. Reflect on what you're grateful for. Again, a lot of research coming out of positive psychology shows that this is a really powerful way to actually increase your positivity towards life in general. It helps you ground yourself and set an intention for the day. Connect and give. Giving is actually a really selfish act because, again, research shows it actually gives us a mood boost. We want to get off social media, clean your food, right? Again, social media is a big stressor for a lot of people. So let's actually be proactive and curate our feed and take stuff off. We want to practice things like breath work. Make sure we're taking regular breaks from our work. Go outdoors. The Japanese have a wonderful phenomenon called forest bathing. And because it's a cultural thing there, they've done a lot of research on it in Japanese universities. And they found that going into the natural environment, even for as little as 15 minutes, actually lowered heart rate, lowered blood pressure, and lowered cortisol. And of course, if your stress becoming unmanageable, then do reach out for help. It is possible to manage it. So menopause and andropause, I'm just cover this really briefly. So I'm not sure what every stage in life people are at. But of course, as we age, this is something we're going to have coming up for us. For women, the menopause, perimenopause is what precedes menopause. That can be from mid to late 30s onwards. It's going to vary from individual to individual when that hits. We go through perimenopause and then into menopause. And then once you've not had a menstrual cycle for a year, we go into what we call the postmenopause phase. For men, it's the andropause we've already talked about. It's testosterone lowering over time. So it's not as pronounced. It's not a window of time where this change happens as it does for females. But it might just be that you get to a point and you're thinking, oh, I haven't got motivation. My energy's gone. My libido is gone. So then it could be worth looking at what could be going on with your testosterone levels for sure. I mean, this estrogen and progesterone decline as we age. As they go down, it makes it harder to lose belly fat because estrogen plays a role in metabolism. It also impacts where we hold fat around the body. So as we have less estrogen, we'll start to shift fat around to the belly area, away from the hips and thighs into the belly. It also negatively impacts our bone density and causes osteoporosis. So again, for women, it's really vital that we do a couple of things. We resistance train as we age to increase bone density, and we make sure we're getting enough calcium into our diet. Testosterone and human growth hormone, they both play a role for cell and tissue regeneration. They help with energy and libido. They promote the utilization of fat for energy. So of course, we want to try and maintain this. We need deep sleep to get it. So sleep is crucial. If we have lower levels, we're going to get higher belly fat, lower energy, lower libido, lower muscle mass, and lower bone mass. So we've got to do something about this. Imagine that all those physical changes are going on, then we're going to have a psychological effect as well. Plus, there are other neurotransmitter changes we can look at in a moment. So it can be a really challenging time of life. I've covered the main hormones, but other hormones and neurotransmitters. So leptin is a hormone that we is our I can never say the word satiety hormone. It gives us that I'm full. It declines as we age, and certain foods will override it. So foods that don't tend to occur in nature don't trigger the hormonal response. A classic example is ice cream. The ratio of fats and sugar in ice cream means that leptin doesn't recognize it as food, which we overeat it. This is the same for a lot of ultra processed foods that are in our food chains today, which means we'll tend to overeat. Our insulin resistance is increasing, meaning that we're less efficient at processing food for energy, more likely to lay it down as body fat. Our serotonin is declining with age, and serotonin actually has a direct relationship with estrogen. So when estrogen are low, serotonin can be low as well. And interesting, like side point here, we're talking again about being superhuman. I don't know, particularly for the females there, whether any of you have ever suffered from anxiety the day after drinking things like fizz or white wine. It's because the sulfites in wine, particularly white wine and fizz, actually lower levels of estrogen, which then in turn lowers serotonin. So the next day you have feelings of anxiety along with a hangover. Awareness precedes change. So the reason we're talking about all this is understanding what's going on so you can be compassionate with yourself and start dialing in those changes. So performance points 1, movement. We want to make sure that we are moving our bodies regularly. It has a positive effect on almost everything we've talked about. We've already looked, as we age, our muscles are getting weaker, we get risk of osteoporosis, but it doesn't have to be like this. What we want to do, though, is make sure we're training in specific ways so we can boost levels of testosterone and human growth hormone, but avoid putting our body under too much stress. When you get it wrong, you'll be like this poor fellow here, and we see this all the time, clients trying to do more and more training to get back where they are, but the body fat isn't shifting because actually they're raising cortisol, they're already stressed in life, and then they're putting the body under more stress. We don't need to be spending hours in the gym is the great news. What we want to do is short, focused workouts. So things that blast your body fat, boost metabolic rate, boost lean muscle, boost bone density, and leave you energized. The kind of ideal program you want to do, might look like this: 2 full body resistance sessions a week, at least 2 days apart, 2 high intensity interval sessions, first thing, fasted, because when we do those fasted, we create an oxygen debt, which burns more calories, spikes on metabolism, and also means we tap into body fat for energy. We might want to do a longer cardio session at the weekend for cardiovascular fitness, and make sure we're getting enough protein into our body along with this. With nutrition, listen, a bad relationship with food keeps you locked in a vicious and obsessive cycle, and diets will ruin your life. So they also disrupt your endocrine system, and it really upsets me when I see people, particularly later in life, going on diet after diet after diet and missing vital food groups, actually not realizing that they're disrupting their hormones still further, weakening their bone density, losing muscle mass. Diets don't work, basically. 98% of dieters will put on the same weight or more, will crash our metabolism, it might affect our immune system. So there is a way. What we want to do is educate ourselves, focus on whole foods. So cut out all those processed foods. We want to cut back on those sugars, minimize those phytoestrogens, especially for the guys. Don't eat carbs after 4 p.m. We want to front load them. We don't need to be taking a lot of energy late in the day. We want to keep carbohydrates to 45 to 50% of our overall diet, not more. Increase our lean protein and healthy fats so that we're triggering that leptin and supporting our muscular growth. And watch our portion sizes and know what our go-to snacks are. I'm also going to say a word here on gut health, because that does have an interplay with neurotransmitters. Most of our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut, so we want to ensure good gut health. And we do that by getting enough pre and probiotics. Prebiotics will come from natural fibers, mainly vegetables. So if we're getting enough vegetables in our diet, that should be enough. Probiotics are live foods we can eat, things like kombucha, sauerkraut, or we can take a probiotic capsule. So here's just a simple way to do it: from field or seed to table with as few steps in between as possible. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. Most of us do it the wrong way around. We eat like energy load late in the day. So remember that. We should go to bed still burning carbohydrate energy, but wake up utilizing body fat for energy. That's our metabolic fitness. Science of stress. I've talked about this. Stress has such a big impact. So we want to learn what our triggers are, learn to pick an alternative reaction, and practice that. Doing the same thing and expecting a different result is a definition of insanity. So we want to make sure we're getting a different outcome. Mastering your mind. I'm flying through here because I'm very conscious of the time, and I want to have time for questions at the end. Our hormones will affect our thoughts and moods, but it's important that we take a step back. We are not our thoughts. We always think of our thoughts as real and absolute. They're not. They're just constructs. We have the right to challenge them. We can change them. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They'll just focus on doing the physical work, like the workouts or the diets, but they're not working on their mindset. And until you do, you'll just end up stuck in a hamster wheel like this guy here. This is because this is a basic model of human behaviors, right? We have something that happens to us. So let's jump in there. You can jump in at any point. An action. When we're a child, a small dog runs at us and barks at us. We get frightened. Result, we have a fear of dogs. Belief, dogs are dangerous and will bite me. When we're out and we see a dog, thought, oh, that dog's going to bite me. Feelings, anxiety, action, you run away from the dog. Result, the dog chases you thinking you're playing. We go round and round in this loop. It's really important to note that hormones and neurotransmitters and their fluctuating levels that we've seen with the menstrual cycle and as we age will have a direct impact on your thoughts and their feelings. So they're interrupting this loop, which is why we need to understand what's going on and build compassion for ourselves. Majority of people believe that our beliefs are more or less fixed, that our thoughts are us, that our emotions are us, but that's all wrong. They are merely constructs. Change is possible, but when we change our psychology, which is something we work really intensively with our clients on, that's what will deliver you long-term success in every area of your life. So performance point, like I said this before, but I can't stress it enough. This is the biggest game changer for people we work with. Don't start your day by letting the outside world in. Start it by doing what works for you. A simple thing to do is gratitude practice. 3 things you're grateful for from yesterday, 3 things in general you're grateful for, and then set an intention for the day. Over time, this is so powerful. So here we go to takeaways. Be aware of your hormones and how you can work with them. You must start moving your body regularly, and you've got to start resistance training. You want to transition to a healthy diet, high in whole foods, reduce sugar, get your stress and cortisol under control. Start actively working on your mindset. Have those morning rituals that work for you. Learn how to manage your thoughts and emotions. But finally, if you are suffering with any of the symptoms that we've covered here, which there's been a lot, I know, then do go and seek medical advice for that as well. That's it. So I'm now going to throw it open to questions. I can see lots of things in the chat which I haven't had open. So I'll see if there's anything there. Feel free to drop anything in here, or Dejan, I don't know how it works for questions.
Thank you so much first for your presentation. It was packed with so much information, and I believe people will just rewatch the replay over and over, because this should be a whole year taught in school, all of it. It's such a profound information, and I think it should be taught in every school because it's so important for your health. I loved also how you mentioned that your hormones are affecting your thoughts and emotions, and it's this whole circle. Your emotions then affect your behavior, then it affects your beliefs, then it affects your thoughts, and you can really get stuck in a negative story of your life just because your hormones might be disbalanced. So it's so crucial that you brought that up. And I have personally two questions I want to go through with you. So you spoke about stress, and when you showed the graph, I realized that there is no escape from stress. Like, we have stress, and stress is given, especially in the modern society, and you cannot escape it. So what are some ways that you will suggest people to manage stress so they are not affected maybe by these stressors so much?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Dejan. And actually, the thing you said just before that, so stress is a really great example. When we're stressed, we want to reach for high energy foods, right? Our body is basically saying, there's a physical need here. I want high energy foods. Because when we're stressed, we suddenly be craving things that are high in sugar, high in starches. But actually, because we're not usually facing a physical threat, we don't need that. So what tends to happen is we get stuck in this wheel. We're like, oh, I'm stressed. I'm going to eat that packet of chocolate biscuits. Then it's like feelings of guilt come for eating the biscuits. I feel stressed about that. And we get in this negative loop. So just understanding that and being aware of it and understanding that some of our behaviors are driven by these hormonal responses, I think can bring compassion. What I'd say for stress triggers is we can practice a model that I call ABC. So we have what we call the activating event. We have in the middle, two B's, the belief and the behavior, and we have C, the consequence. So, it might be essentially we can boil this down to tell a different story, right? Let's use an example everyone can relate to. You're driving somewhere and someone cuts you up and there's like swearing at you through the window of the car, road rage, activating event. So, consequence is we go straight to C. You're going to get really stressed about it. You'll probably shout back at them. It maybe escalates. When you get to where you're going, you get out, you're like, you won't believe what happened to me. You're still holding that stress, right? And that's your behavior there that you allow to get stressed. So what you want to do is like activating event. We get cut up by the person in the car. We get all stressed out. We think for a moment, actually, what do I want the consequence of this to be? Do I want my day to be like full of stress, or am I going to let this go? So then I'm going to change my belief and behavior. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe that guy was rushing to hospital because something happened to someone he loves. That's why he was acting like that. He's stressed. I'm not going to carry that stress. So it's just choosing. Remember this, it's ABC. It's a way of just pausing and going, what's the result I want from this? Rather than just going straight into that reaction.
Thank you for your answer. I believe a lot of us in these situations are just focused so much on blaming the other person, right? We're not focused on how that will affect also us, because
Yeah.
when you blame someone, it's a double-edged sword. It's also affecting your reality too. So the other person did what they did, but you are controlling your reality. So you can always fill in these blind spots or gaps that you don't know what happened with a positive thing, so it can affect you. It doesn't necessarily need to be the truth. Maybe the guy sucks. You don't know. But
Exactly.
in your reality, what will help you is to fill that blind spot with something more positive. So thank you for bringing this up. And the second question is, because I know a lot of foods, a lot of even water in the modern society is polluted in a certain way. So when we try to eat healthy, when we try to live healthy, more often than not, we will be caught in some of these traps. Be that, as you said, some diet that they promise is the holy grail of every diet, or some certain food that they brand as healthy food, or even drinking water. There is a specific way of drinking water because tap water is polluted with different type of chemicals. So can you share with us, I know it's a big question, but few tips how to navigate modern societies to live a healthy life?
Yeah, I guess, unfortunately, pollutants are all around us, right? And they do disrupt our endocrine system and have another of negative impacts on our health. I guess, if we go and live in a secluded mountaintop somewhere well away from everyone, that's really going to help, but it's not practical for most people. So the stuff we can't really do much about. If we live in a city, we are going to be surrounded by pollutants. But what we can do is start looking at things like, our water supply. do we want to start buying bottled water that we know where the source is, or do we like want to invest in like a good filter system that's going to pull a lot of the bad stuff out of the water? That's one thing. When we're looking at the food we eat, can we find like a local farmers market where we know actually like where that food has come from, the journey it's come from, has that been produced organically without chemicals added to it? So the small things we can do like that can really help.
Thank you so much. And we have one more questions from the chat.
Yeah.
A specific question, and it's she says, I have a DNA snippet missing that helps to break down lipids, making it near impossible for my body to digest anything fermented, which is the typical suggestion I receive, like kombucha, apple cider vinegar, etc. Any suggestions for morning foods under those conditions?
So I'm not sure that's specifically about a morning food or a gut health. For morning, I don't know whether if you can't have fermented foods, I'll start my day with a bit of lemon juice just squeezed into hot water, and that seems to be a really good way for me to just kind of cleanse my system first thing in the morning. So I'd say as a start for the day, if you can tolerate that with your condition, that's really good. Just a lemon juice, fresh lemon, squeezed in some hot water and drink it. I'd say if you're talking about your gut health there, of course, it doesn't have to be fermented foods. I don't know, you haven't said in your message there, but we could eat things like live yogurts, probiotic yogurts. If you can't stomach those, then you can buy probiotic capsules, which you can just take, and that will just put the probiotics straight into your gut, which is good for the gut health.
Thank you so much, Jim. And this whole presentation was amazing. So if anybody wants to connect with you, work with you, where can they find you?
You can find us there, themidlifementors.com. Drop me an email, James at, and you find us on socials under the Midlife Mentors or Midlife Mentors.
Perfect. So we're going to share also this presentation with everyone so they can also find the links inside, and it can also guide them as a material to learn more about this beautiful and vast subject. So thank you so much.